Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pirates versus Agoners podcast. I am ThyPirateKing, and with me, as always, is Remy. So, today we're going to be discussing taunting and teabagging for competitive and casual gaming, the differences, the strengths, the weaknesses, just everything about taunting and teabagging. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. I think a lot of people have a lot of different viewpoints on this subject. I know some people think teabagging's hilarious. Some people think teabagging is the worst thing you can do to someone else in an online game, and some people are kind of in the middle. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'd say just say hello there
yeah,
first of all. Yeah, hi Pirate King, and I'm Remy as you've introduced me. So good evening or good morning or whatever time it is for you when you're watching this.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so I think we should just step on into this, right?
Yeah,
So I do want to clarify this because we are discussing just mind games and things and just all these things within competition, but we are specifically talking about sort of things that could be inside the game, but it's more of an outside psychological thing. So there's this idea of playing mind games with your opponent where you bait them into doing something, right? This isn't really that. This is more tilting your opponent, perhaps, or trying to maybe get a psychological.
yeah, it really is like we talk about mind games within like a fighting game is often to do with like mix-ups and you know um baiting moves and things like that. We're not really talking about that here, obviously. We're talking about things that are kind of on the borderline. They kind of might be in-game mechanics technically, but you're not using the in-game mechanics in perhaps the way they're intended. Um, and it's very much about, yeah, the psychological battle between yourself and your opponent outside of the mechanics of the game in some senses. Um, yeah, so I mean, so taunting itself, I guess there's a lot of different ways you can actually do some kind of taunt or something to try and rile up your opponent. And we were talking about what is the kind of why would you do this?
Yeah, what's the
Because you were
purpose
saying
of
that
the taunting?
yeah,
Yeah.
what's the purpose of it? And I mean, I initially generally think it's done to try and irritate your opponent and therefore possibly put them onto tilt, put them in a bad mood. Um, could get to defining tilt here, but generally speaking, it's just about putting your opponent into a bad mental state where they play worse. Is the intention of it from a competitive standpoint?
Well, yeah, when
Uh,
people tilt, they play worse, and I think this is. I mean, not even in games, just when you are frustrated, when you are getting a little angry or a little heated, it's going to impact you in ways that you might not even be conscious of. Like subconsciously, it's going to impact you. I mean, we're obviously talking about video gaming, but I mean, think about whenever you've gotten angry in real life. You don't think straight,
mm,
right? Like like some people even do things in anger that they regret later on, right? Sometimes it can be as simple as I don't know, punching a wall, right, and hurting your hand, or slamming your
regret
hand
that
on your
later.
or
Yeah.
slamming your hand on like your keyboard and breaking your keyboard, or it can be as extreme, right, as someone getting mad and punching someone else in the face, right? Which
Mm,
obviously that's you're not you shouldn't do that, right? But again, it's in anger, right? And a lot of times people regret these things. But in a video game, same thing can happen, right? You get angry at the person you're playing against or the people that you're playing against, and you might throw a punch in the video game, right? Like not in real life, but like you press the punch key in the video game, but you shouldn't have pressed the punch key. You should have pressed the block key, and now you're dead. Um, so that's what I think is interesting. That tilt happens not just in video games, but it happens in real
of
life,
course,
but
yeah.
that tilting impacts your play, right? It impacts your decision making.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have. I mean, it happens in all kinds of competitive avenues as well, in sports and things like that, and even in non activities like, say, I know we've mentioned Magic the Gathering in the past and things like that. Those kind of games, so board games and card games and all kinds of games and anything competitive. This sort of thing definitely comes up. Um, You did say like we were saying the reason often is it is like a purposeful thing that you're doing like some kind of taunting mechanic in a game or some way of taunting your opponent. It can be done as an advantageous thing, like on purpose, but also it can just be an entertainment aspect.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've seen it happen in like tournaments on stream, um, or you might just be playing your friends. and there might be a group of you, or even just two of you, and you're kind of doing it for the fun reaction out of your friends and things like that. So it's not always like it's like malicious. It's not even necessarily with any intent than other amusement for yourselves and even others. Um, but sometimes it's definitely done with the intent to try and cause, try and get a psychological edge on your opponent.
I think it
Um,
also going with the intent and the how you're using it, whether it be just fun and get a laugh out of your friends or actual way to try and tilt your opponent. I think it also is based off of the person, right? Some people, even friends, you might do it just for fun, right? And you're not actually trying to tilt them, and they could take it
mhm.
very, very badly. They could say, why did you teabag me? Like, what are you doing? And you just look at them as like, joke, man. But they like get really, really mad at it, really, really annoyed at it. So different people are gonna take it differently, right? I think Knuckle Dew is really known for teabagging. Yeah, Knuckle Dew is really known for
Yeah,
teabag. He's a Street Fighter Five player, I believe. Um,
he started in Street Fighter 4. That's where he got big, and I mean that was definitely for both reasons.
yeah,
I
like
think it was for entertainment's sake as well, but it certainly got his name noticed because
he tilted people by doing it.
he also sometimes taunted people.
Like
Yeah.
I've seen videos where he was playing against someone, and so I've seen two different sides of it, right? I've seen one side where
Mm.
he was beating someone up, right? And every time he got a chance to, he would teabag. Even when he could build meter, he would just teabag them, right? Because he's Knuckle Dude, right? And some of them he would beat the person. He would be teabagging them throughout the whole match, and he'd like reach his hand out for a shake or like a knuckle bump, and the person would just walk away. Wouldn't even like acknowledge Knuckle Dude. And then I've also seen other sides where he'll start teabagging, and then his opponent will start teabagging too, and they just look at each other and are
Yeah.
laughing and having a good time. So I think a lot of it sometimes depends on the person. I think it's almost like an individual thing, whether you hate teabagging or get like, I think offended is the right word, like get offended by it, or whether
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
aren't, right. Me personally, I've been on both sides because I mean we wanted to talk about this, but teabagging I think we agree that it kind of gained prominence in Halo, right?
Yeah, well, I was about to say you dropped the teabag word initially, then, and that's like a specific form of taunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you say, I think historically it started in Halo, and I believe it's for a couple of reasons. So, for one, it had obviously it's the first kind of console first-person shooter that got really big, um, and it had like a simple crouch command that was quite useful, um, and then it also had the kind of kill cam aspect where you would see if you'd been killed, you would see like what
You would see what
happened.
they did to your
The
body. Yeah.
opponent, yeah, you wouldn't instantly boom, you're dead, and that's it. Like you couldn't see anything. You'd see them do it, and that's what created it. And obviously, the idea of those kill cams wasn't anything to do with this. It was just to give you to make it clear what happened to the player because you often had frustrations in earlier first person shooters where you kind of like got blindsided and you got shot or killed and you didn't know what had happened. So the intention of these kill cams was good, but then obviously people found this thing. So teabagging was obviously a reference to crouching up and down on your opponent's
It's such a
uh,
simple thing
the,
too, right? It's so simple. You literally just walk over your opponent's dead body and you just crouch spam, right?
mm,
You teabag them. I mean, I don't think we need
yes.
to describe why it's called teabag. I think people can figure that out themselves.
No. Hopefully they can
But
figure it out.
it's very interesting, right? And yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting topic. It's kind of funny to think about. I saw a Corey gaming video. If anyone hasn't checked out, they should. He made a great video about taunting. Um, and one of the things I think he brought up was that like some people argue it's like why are people getting mad at teabagging when you're already playing a murder, right? Um, and I think Corey Gaming, I'm paraphrasing here, but he brought up the idea that here's the thing, in actual wartime, like you weren't really allowed to like actually like use a teabag, like that wasn't like allowed. It wasn't like acceptable in some places in the world, which I haven't fact checked him on that. I'm just gonna assume he's correct there. Which is kind of interesting, right? Because you know, there's this thing where you are playing a murder simulator, but is it acceptable to sort of like taunt your opponent? Like, I mean, this goes to real war too, right? In real life war, well, like when like you kill someone in a real war, like it's kind of expected to not like defile their body, right? Like to hurt them, right?
Mm,
In real life. So maybe that's something that's sort of being brought over into video games in a sense where yes, you are playing
mm.
a game, but you should be playing the game, not you should be playing the game by the rules that the game have, not doing these things that are I guess looked down upon, you know?
Yeah, and it's the non. It's again what we said earlier. It was like it's the not the mechanical aspect of the game. Like this didn't have. This was like after you'd already won, so it's not part of the game in some way.
Sometimes it's even
Um,
worse to teabag, right? Like in Street Fighter Five, like when you have them stunned, when you teabag, you're not building meter, right? So you're literally
oh
doing something that is unbeneficial to you, right?
well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, one thing I personally like dislike about it is the fact it's such a almost like toxic masculinity kind of thing. Like it's such a yeah, it's the maleness of it that kind of bothers me a little bit because as what we're talking about here, like people can figure it out, and that's obviously that becomes a bit exclusionary in a way, especially when a lot of these competitive games are trying to open it up and like bring it to different genders and things like that, and that's something I really believe in and think that's a great way forward for video games
We
and
both
competitive
do, I
gaming.
think. Yeah, absolutely. I think
So I feel like that's something that frustrates me about it. But when you talk about other kind of taunts, so in some fighting games, they've had like built-in taunt mechanics within the game. Some of them even have in-game effects as well, but the purest ones don't do anything at all, right? And they're just there to have an actual physical taunt within the game.
Super Smash Brothers, I
Um,
think, is a great example.
does that have a taunt?
Yeah,
Okay,
there's taunts in the
interesting.
game. Yeah, each character. I mean, well, okay. Here's the thing. Like, it's not like it's called a taunt, but it's sort of like a little like thing that the character does. Like Zelda has one where she's just sort of like she like twirls around, and Link has one where he like sword out and like does a flourish.
Yeah,
But like you can use that to like launch your opponent. I mean, Captain Falcon has a great one where he if you ever see a Captain Falcon player play, one of the things, or at least in my experience, one of the things they'll always do is that if they kill you, especially if they kill you in a very flashy way, like in something that is just unneeded, but they kill you that way, they'll go on the ground and they'll do this taunt where he does this and he goes, "Show me your moves," and
right.
it's the best thing ever because like you kill them and then you're like, "Show me your moves," you know. Um, it's wonderful. And like all the characters have their own little taunts and stuff. King K. Rool has a great one where he like slaps his belly, and I would do that to my friends all the time. If I beat them with K. Rool, I would just slap my
Right.
belly, you know. Um,
I mean, I think it's good. I think I much prefer those. So I much prefer like ones that are built into the game. They're just more funny and they don't have any of these kind of bad aspects to do with them. And you can still use them in exactly the same way you're describing. So you've kind of got all the advantages of want if you want the ability to do a taunt. But you don't have to have this kind of vulgar side to it that people perceive. Um, it's funny we talked about Knuckle Dude earlier. They added I can't remember when they added taunts, if were they always in Street Fighter 4 originally. Um, so Street Fighter 4 wasn't my favorite Street Fighter. They were definitely in older Street Fighter. Street Fighter Zero actually was the first Street Fighter I can think of that had taunts in. And then sorry, Alpha series in America. So the Street Fighter Alpha series, and they actually had a character called Dan, and he had the first taunts, and he actually had, and then they actually added taunts to all the characters. His taunts became more outrageous, so he could do like air taunts and ground taunts, and he could even do a super taunt where he wasted his super meter to
what?
do the most ridiculously long taunt possible.
I would do that. I
Um,
would do that every game.
well, if you want to check the archives of Agoners, I've actually got a huge series of me playing online as Dan, who was probably one of the weakest characters in the game. Maybe not the weakest,
Not
but
only
yes, I
the
used to go
weakest
online.
character, but you're using the super meter of the weakest character to do nothing.
Yeah, yeah, and his taunts they were really good, and so he was a character that you almost, because he was quite bad, uh, like adding the taunts really actually was good because you kind of needed to like
you
get
add
your opponent to do something. So that I can see the fun side of it, and that because that was built into the game, And some of his taunts had like small in-game effects. Like one of the ultimate things you could actually, one of his taunts could actually hit the opponent. It was absolutely useless, but if you could pull it off, like that was like really rubbing it in because you managed to do his air taunt and then actually get a hit with it.
Like
I'm not
quarter,
sure you could ever
like
KO.
the only way to taunt in Street Fighter 4, quarter circle, diagonal, and you have to do all these like motions, and then you get your taunt.
You will the yeah, the super taunt with double
Was it
fireball motion
really?
and
Was it
press the
really?
button.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that would eat your meter. And I'll use it like and I still played it like I played that game in a retro arcade quite recently, and of course I was straight onto Dan and straight doing that. But actually he's like 90 because he's really weak in I was at Street Fighter Alpha 2 that variant, and he is pretty bad in that actually. I mean, but I'm partly playing him to be a bit of a handicap as well because like if I'm playing friends that are a lot newer at the game or whatever, like not as experienced players as me, like this is fun for that reason. And then I can wind them up, and it's like in good fun, and it's also fun in the arcade because you got that physical presence between two players. So
I think
whereas
that's
I think
another.
online,
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say. I
yeah,
think that's
sorry,
another thing with the idea of like taunting. Like there's a different, I think, connotation to when you do taunting when you're in real life tournament, and when you do taunting when you're online, right? So when I'm
mm,
playing people online and I have no idea who they are, I don't think taunting is as effective. I think it depends, right? Because sometimes it can be. But I think sometimes it does it. Like it's about like 50-50, but I think usually it's not as effective when it's random players depending
mm.
on how the match is going, right? But in a real life tournament with real people, I think sometimes it can be worse. I don't know. I think again it all goes back to the individual, right? I really think it depends because like I've had moments where I'm losing, and I mean we were talking about this for the podcast. I love taunting and I love teabagging. I think it's hilarious. But I have had moments where it's happened to me. I get very mad. Like I get really mad, and then after like a day or two, I think back on it. I was like, man, I am such a hypocrite, because like I'm doing the same thing.
Right.
Like it's funny because you're okay with it when you're winning, but when you start losing, you know.
The funny thing was all those matches I played hundreds and hundreds. Like he was my main character online in Street because I didn't play that game very seriously. I didn't particularly enjoy it, so like I tried different ways to play Street Fighter 4 to try and have fun with it, and one of the ways was play Dan. But I don't think I ever had anyone do it back to me.
Really.
Um, no, it was very weird. But it may just be a chance. But like say I I've got the counter thing to the most experience I've had of this recently would be in Street Fighter 5. And like as you say, sometimes you'll get the like deliberate sort of teabagging motion where they so people obviously it started in Halo and it was all about thing, but as people do it in fighting games and they use the like crouch command and then release to standing reach like so again you've got the same kind of motion of a character ducking down.
I have to have a little
Um
bit more imagination, of course.
yeah,
Teabag
it's
is
because not quite yeah,
not the
it's
same.
not quite the same,
It's
but
not the
people
same,
got
but people view it the same, right?
yeah, it's the intention behind it seems to be the same sort of thing, but it actually generally backfires on if people do it to me, particularly online. I don't know in real life or someone I know, maybe it would frustrate me in some ways, but like if I'm playing someone online, I have the general mindset that it's hard for me to actually take an online match that seriously. So, but if someone does that, then I will sometimes go right. Okay, I'm going to play best. You know,
Because you want
actually,
to beat the person who's taunting you, right?
it really heightens my focus, and that is something I generally struggle with online is maintaining my focus. So if someone taunts me, I've got not lots of them, but I've got a bunch of videos of Street Fighter 5 videos I posted where I do a big comeback and beat them because they did that to me, and it's like you probably would have won,
Yeah.
but you taunted me, like, and I'm like,
You've
okay, I'm gonna
awoken the
play for real
demon
now,
inside.
like, yeah, like,
The hidden
or you get it when
dragon.
yeah. It doesn't always work, and I very rarely do it to people in Street Fighter again because of this thing. And they get and you get it when you say one of the examples in Street Fighter, you sometimes do it when you stun the opponent, and then you try and like actually get the KO, and you don't get the KO, and it's like you've given them an opportunity to do
And
the
you don't
comeback, and
get the
also
KO because you teabagged.
or may possibly because you do lose an opportunity to gain a little bit of meter. But the way there's a combo reduction mechanic in Street Fighter 5. So if someone's stunned, the next combo isn't going to do full damage to them
Yeah.
anyway. because the combo that got them into the stun state counts as part of that combo. So yeah, and also you can mash out of a stun state, and if someone starts like doing the stupid teabag motion or anything dumb, I usually in Street Fighter Five the stun you can't speed it up that much. It's the minimum time you can be stunned is pretty high, but you can speed it up, and I will mash out of it like nobody's business if I see they're going to mess about and not just hit me. Yeah, and again, I've often got out of the stun and they failed to hit me because they tried to teabag. So there's a load of elements where it can really backfire on you.
There are some
Um,
just I wanted to comment here about like taunting, where like those kinds of taunts obviously don't have an impact on the game like mechanically. There are some taunts in Smash Brothers specifically that I know of that actually do have impacts in the game. They're hilarious. For example, with Snake, he has a taunt where he goes into his little box, right? And then he
oh yeah,
lifts off
yeah.
the box, and the box actually is a hitbox and can hit the opponent. It doesn't really do any damage, but I've actually had cases where I was playing against someone, very rarely, but one of my friends has done it to me. I think it's only happened like once, but it actually messed me up because I wasn't able to get on the ledge, and I was so mad, but like in a funny way because it's oh my god, I just lost this. Luigi also has one where he kicks his foot and it actually can spike people if they're on the ledge, which is hilarious and it's a taunt. So so there are definitely
Yeah,
examples of taunts having impact in the game. I don't know if I'm necessarily for that, but it is
but
funny.
those they're once they're actually doing things in the game though, they essentially are an actual move now. Like
Yeah.
Street Fighter has loads of these as well. So like Street Fighter 3 particularly, like every character's taunt has some mechanical impact on the game. And some of them aren't particularly useful, and they're probably going to get you into trouble
Yeah.
more than they're ever going
The
to
use
help
is
you.
very
So
very rare, yeah.
Remy's taunt, for example, in Street Fighter 3, my namesake, it's absolutely useless and you should never use it. And also, you can't cancel it. There's different fighting games have different mechanics for them, and some of them you can start the taunt motion and then stop it. But some of them, once you press the taunt, your character's going to do a canned animation. You can't break out of it. If
That's
I
how it
remember
is in
correctly,
Overwatch. Like if you do an emote in Overwatch,
yeah.
you can't break out. And there have been cases where I've done an emote like after killing someone to get in their head, and then I die. Like,
And then their teammate like who takes revenge on you. Yeah. So again, but Street Fighter Three is like some of the characters. There's a character who like actually Remy's will do. I think it reduces his stun gauge or gains a bit of meter. Like, but it takes so long for the meter gain. It's not worth doing. But there are some characters where it's really, really part of their game plan. So like one character, Dudley, his taunt throws a rose, and that's actually his only projectile. It's a pretty rubbish projectile, but he actually needs to use it in certain
don't knock
situations.
the
So
rose. Rose is the
and
best.
it can sometimes whiff, so it's like random. It's got a random element to it as well. And he manages to try and throw the rose, but like the petals fall off or something, and it doesn't actually launch across the screen. But we'll see the one. And Q, if you've heard of him, he's another character. His taunt is a really important part of his gameplay. I can't know if it powers up his next hit or powers up the stun that his next hit does, or I think it might even no, it increases defense slightly, so he gradually, essentially, is gaining more and more hit points slowly if you let him taunt. So he actually wants to do it. Like you'll often see these players. I first saw it actually, and I was like, "Hang on, what's this doing?" Because I was in Japan and this guy was doing it in an arcade to me, and I wasn't sure why because it didn't make sense. And then I figured it out later. I was like, "Oh, actually, he was like not. He was getting the knockdown, and he was only doing it in specific circumstances where I couldn't punish him for doing it." Um, so yeah, I mean, I love those kind of taunts. Whether they're not strictly a taunt though, once they become a useful move,
But they still,
like
I think it's like half and half at that point, right? It's like kind of a taunt, but kind of it depends on what it is, right?
it really depends on it. Yeah, um, and I definitely think. I mean, talking about like, should these things be allowed in competition and in like on games and online? I mean, obviously, if you're playing online, there's nothing you can do about this. Like, I suppose you could have
You could
some
like
kind
make
of
it
report.
yeah, you could make it like a reportable offense, but I don't think
Mm,
me personally, I don't think you should ever do that because because then there's this question of intent, right? What if it's a new player who doesn't even know what it is, right? Doesn't know the
yeah, they've seen
connotation.
someone else do it and they
Yeah.
just think it's funny or
Or
whatever. Like, yeah,
yeah,
or
and then like you said, funny, right? Like some people are gonna take a joke and laugh at it. Some people aren't. Some
Mhm.
people aren't going to know what it means, like the whole connotation with like Halo and all of that. Some people will. And then there's also going to be the case where I've seen people like videos and stuff where they're talking about how they'll kill someone in like say Overwatch, right? And as they're shooting that person in Overwatch, a lot of times when you're shooting people, like you're crouching and you're dodging a lot, so it looks like you're doing that, right? But in the middle of the fight, it's like people are okay with that because it's dodging. But then if you kill
Yeah.
that person, but you're still crouching and and like moving around, some people like think that you're doing it to do it to them, even when most of the
And
time
you know,
you just haven't stopped doing it yet because you're still in that mindset, which is kind of an interesting
yeah.
too. Because then if it's reportable, then what if that person gets like banned and it's like I wasn't doing it on purpose. Um,
It would be hard to judge some of these situations. You actually get it in Street Fighter Five as well, where you've got certain characters that've got like long range high-low mix-ups, and one of the ways you can actually slightly defend against that is to you'll see it in real tournaments quite a lot, and you're like, what's this guy teabagging? Oh no, they're not teabagging. They're actually deliberately mixing in their block between high and low, and it's kind of making it a 50-50. So there's a chance that they'll be blocking the correct way,
yeah,
like by accident, and I've used it a couple of times as well in those situations. So it's not particularly effective, but it is a thing you can do. And again, that would be a bit unclear. There's also the retaliation taunt. Yeah, like I would never initiate it, but if someone does it to me, then I might do it back to them. And then it's like
I always initiate it.
escalating thing
I
online.
always
You always
initiate. I always initiate
initiate the
the
taunting.
taunting and the teabag. Like I will be playing with
Yeah.
my friends with Smash or something, and the moment I take a stock, just up down up down up down, right? And this is something that I find super fascinating, specifically about teabagging, right? Is that it's such it's literally 1 to 2 buttons, but it has such like a visceral impact on some people. It has such an emotional impact on some people where you can press control,
Mm,
just control for crouching, or you can press, S for crouching in a fighting game. It's just such a simple thing. But some people, even myself, I've gotten really mad at it before. It's just some people just get very mad at just such a simple, right? That's just something that I find interesting psychologically, right? Um, I'm
yeah.
not saying they
I
should
think
or shouldn't
it's
get
the
mad.
intent though.
Yeah.
I think it's so often the intent is to kind of show disrespect. I think that's why people get mad because there's a kind of it kind of comes down to sportsmanship and things like that, and it's like, well, showing your opponent respect and like playing hard and all that. There's various other things as well, but again, it becomes really difficult, and you can't totally legislate for some of these things, especially not in a general online game, because like anything could be seen as potentially disrespectful. Like if I mean, I know we both play Fantasy Strike, and if I'm playing against a new player online in Fantasy Strike, and I realize that they're new and I'm going to beat them, like I will always like let them win 1 or 2 rounds.
We've talked about this
Um,
before, yeah.
and yeah, and like, is that the? But some people could, if they knew I try and make it very not obvious. Like I try and make it look like I'm playing for real, but I'm actually not, right? Um, and then but to say they knew I was doing it for some reason, they go like, okay, I can just tell you, just let me win around. That's disrespectful. And I'm like, no, I was trying to make you feel a bit better about this match because you've
Well, that's
like
another
maybe got
thing,
match.
right? Some people want to be taken a little easy. Like some like I played against people where most of my friends they don't want me to take it easy on them. But I've even had
Yeah,
some
yeah,
instances where I played with a friend who I'm significantly better at like Super Smash Brothers, and I've asked them, "It's like, do you want me to like take it easy on you?" You know? And sometimes they've been like, "Yeah, like I want you to take it a little easy on me so I can kind of figure things out." I was like, all right, I'll just do these moves, right?
yeah,
Until you
yeah.
figure it out. And I try and sometimes do that online in Fantasy Strike. If I'm playing against a new player, I'll sometimes just do one move the entire time. And here's the thing though,
Mm,
I sometimes worry because I'm thinking this is a good way, I think, to teach someone how to deal with something, right? Like a reversal, and to just keep doing that same move. But in another way, I
mm.
sometimes worry that I'm tilting them because they're losing like 10 games in a row to one move, right? And it's just like, are they getting
Yeah.
mad? But then they keep rematching me, so I'm like, maybe they're not mad, or maybe they are
Maybe they're
mad and they
fine.
want to
Maybe they're
beat
trying to
me.
figure out.
Yeah.
You just don't know online when you've got no communicate with the person. Like you say, in the best case scenario, you get to ask them and say, "Okay, how would you like me to play this?" Or, but but that's the trouble. It's like so many people can respond to these things so many ways. Like even asking that question could frustrate some people. and say, well, obviously you should have known that, oh, you're saying you're so much better than me.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. If you ask the question, yeah.
it's really like, yeah, it's very, very difficult. So I think that kind of thing, like clearly you can't really disallow it in certain situations. When it comes into sort of tournament situations, though, that's where it becomes a bit more interesting. So, like you brought up Knuckle earlier, and he's like a fascinating case of this because when I first saw him doing this, oh, sorry, I mentioned he used to build in when they added taunts into Street Fighter 4 itself. I know they always had them, but they were kind of useless because I think they were a canned animation. So basically, if you did them, you could taunt, but you're always going to get hit back. But the
Worth it.
character he played, Guile, maybe the character he played, he didn't do that, but the character he played, Guile, they added a special taunt he could do where he could put his shades on and off.
Oh, oh
And he
yes.
could do it, and he could do it mid combo if you were really good. And that's when Knuckle got ridiculous because he would do like shades combos, and then he'd do teabagging at the same time. He'd like combine all these things together,
Knuckle
and
Dude's my
like
hero. Me.
he's your hero, is he? I mean, he doesn't do it really in Street Fighter 5. He'll only do it against certain people, like on certain stun, like clearly I've won already situations. Like, but I mean, he's made so much money now. He's like more serious and there's more money involved. I think he's like, and he's got a bit older. He's like calmed down a lot on it. Um, but in Street Fighter 4, it almost, I was like, did they put that mechanic in for him? Because Guile didn't have that initially, and then he got kind of known, and then they put this in, and yeah, it was just, yeah, I did find that entertaining to watch, but I don't know how his opponents always felt like that. And then, as we say, you could ban that kind of thing in a tournament. Um, difficulty with I suppose fighting game tournaments is a lot of them are large open bracket events, and you don't have that kind of stringent um, viewpoint on it. What you need if you're going to have these kind of soft rules, if you like, of respectful play or sportsmanship and things like that, you need a referee essentially always there.
But
So
intent is very. I mean, I want to make sure we're covering this. That intent's so important because
mm,
let's say that you well that teabagging is not allowed, right? What is considered? What is considered teabagging and what is considered actual tactical, right? Because sometimes, like you said in that instance of the 50-50, like
yeah.
teabagging is a tactical play. Like, how do you know if they're just doing it because they're being rude or if they're doing it because they want to mix up their opponent? This is why
Mm,
I personally think that we shouldn't ban it
mm.
because I don't think there's a way to actually prove, unless they're actively showing intent. You
Well,
can show intent sometimes, but it's hard. You know.
yeah, well, you could define some rules like, okay, in this situation, if you do this exact thing, then we're going to rule that offense, right? But I mean, the argument for like banning these kind of things is actually real life sports, um, where I mean, in the NFL, you can get disqualified from the game. You can get like if the referee is deemed you taunting. So you're not. So here's an example, like spiking the ball. So that's like throwing the ball on the ground, right? After you do a good play or a score, usually after a touchdown is usually the
Yeah,
situation
that
you'll do it,
happens a
right?
lot, though, right?
Um, Spiking, yeah, but you're allowed to spike the ball, but you're not allowed to throw it at another team, at the opposing team.
Hmm.
So if they think you were trying to smack it, like if you'd go up to someone and like throw the ball down in their face, as it were, that's a penalty,
Well, I
right?
think that's because like you could
And
actually
that's
hurt someone, right?
no, nowhere near them. But not no, like it's all about the intent to show disrespect. That's actually what
Hmm.
it's about.
Okay.
And if they get like if you did spitting on someone, like if even like verbal taunting gets called as penalties, um, and if you do enough of them, usually like these kind of minor ones, they won't get the player disqualified immediately. But if they keep doing it, they get like a warning, and then if they keep doing it, they get disqualified
What
from the
if what
game.
if they did
So,
something like they got a touchdown and they like went up they looked at the enemy team and they did like a pelvic thrust or something? Like would that be allowed?
oh,
Or is that not allowed?
probably a penalty.
Ah, see,
Like
I think that's
they, they've
hilarious. I think
they've
that'd be funny.
loosened it. They've loosened it a lot. Where it used to be NFL No Fun League because they were like you couldn't even do like even celebrations. Like lots of celebrations weren't allowed at all. They've now loosened it in the last couple of years. They've said like you're allowed to do like celebrations and you're allowed to do them with your teammates. But anything
Interesting.
that appears to be directed at the opposition is where they draw the line. But I actually think so. Some of the celebrations have already become quite like extravagant, let's say. So I do think there's going to be a line crossed where it's going to be judged taunting and something's going to happen. So there's actually a really famous one where a player sort of scored a touchdown and he took the ball and he went to the center of the field. So where the because it was the opposing team stadium and like basically threw the ball down on their logo.
Ooh.
Now, but the technically was allowed, right? Because it wasn't doing it at another player. But the other team
He was
got
doing
mad and
yeah, he was doing
they all
at the
stormed the field. They all
metaphorical
stormed the
player.
field and like, sorry.
He was doing it at the metaphorical player. The idea of the players,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it caused a fight. Like the other team came on, and it was like caused all those problems. So, I mean, but this is, yeah. I mean, this is where like clearly, you would draw the line in any video gaming events. Would be any kind of things outside of the game, like anything that became physical violence,
Yeah, I think we can both
like
agree that
verbal abuse,
yeah.
like abusive language. We already have it. It is a question of where you draw the line on these things. And if you have enough referees to actually legislate this stuff, and sure, they're always going to make mistakes, but there is always going to be a line. And obviously, for you, these kind of in-game things are absolutely fine. I think they're fine for me as well. I've enjoyed watching them. Like the Nukudo example is a fantastic example. I've really enjoyed watching that. I've done it myself when playing a character that's designed to do it, but I wouldn't do it in a normal match online. But yeah, like and I've never seen it done like in a tournament to me, so I don't know how I'd feel about it. In a more serious event, not that I've played in like anything super serious for
I've
like
definitely done
huge
it
sums of
in
money.
I've definitely done it in tournaments, but it was against like a friend. You know, like I generally don't if I'm in like a tournament, I generally
Hmm.
don't taunt at least on purpose. Sometimes I do it accidentally because for me with my friend group, taunting like teabagging things like that, it's just funny for us. So sometimes when I'm like playing
Yeah,
against random people, I'll start doing it and I'm like, "Oh," and then I stop because I'm like, "Oh, they might not take it the
they
same
might not
way,"
see
you
the
know?
they might not see the
Um
funny side. Yeah,
but sometimes I do, and like I'll see them do it too. And I was like, okay, so we're on the same page here, right? But yeah, I try not to do it to random people unless I know them, like or get to know them for a while,
hmm,
just because people are gonna take it differently, and I don't want to like I don't want someone to think that I'm doing it to like be rude, because most of the time when I'm
yeah,
taunting, I'm not doing it to be rude to them. I will say sometimes I do in online games
yeah.
because sometimes someone's like annoying, like someone in chat is just being really obnoxious and then I kill them like in Overwatch or something, and then I teabag them and like put them in their place, right? Like I think Sonic Fox said something like that. I think he was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked something along, "Why did you teabag this person?" or something, and he said like I gotta show them who the alpha is, like I gotta put them in in their place, and I was just like, oh man, that's that's and like to me that was funny because I was like that is like it's kind of funny because I mean he was smiling the whole time too, like he was like joking around. I think like he was like I gotta put them in their place, right? Like he was talking smack to me on Twitter or whatever. I gotta show him who the alpha is,
Yeah.
right? And obviously this goes back to what you were saying though. I think about this this I guess like male culture that's almost been surrounding video games for a very long time. I think we can both agree that video games have predominantly been male centered.
Yeah.
And I think we both agree that we want females to play, right? We want females in our games. We want them to have just as much fun as we do. And I don't think that we should take away teabagging, but I think
Well, the
that
in-game
as a
stuff.
community we should try and be more like I guess how do I say it? Like less I don't know how to describe it because like I've seen females be more vulgar than me. You know what I mean? So it's
Really.
like it's like
It's not a simple thing, but when you come to sort of event though, there is like everyone does know there is a line that can't be crossed with these things, right?
there's like
Um,
these hidden rules, right? These hidden like
yeah,
social.
and they
I think it's a
usually.
social norm, right? Like there's just like
Hmm.
a cultural thing that you do. I'll let you finish.
Well, no, absolutely. No, yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, we're going to talk about like different cultures and things like that, and how maybe also. But yes, yeah, like when you come to these events, like everyone does know there is some kind of line that can't be crossed. And sometimes they only get discovered though by people pushing these boundaries. And then it's like, okay, we need to make a rule about this now. Because like even though obviously fighting game events have been running for decades now, they're still relatively young things, and like
Esports in
video
general
game
is
events,
fairly new,
esports in
right?
general is still very young, so they're still kind of figuring this stuff out. But I do think like as things become bigger and more professional, more money, we're going to move towards like real sports, and they generally have a lot of rules about this kind of thing. Um, Even in like actual violent sports and things like that, like boxing or American football, like and ice hockey and things like that. And ice hockey is interesting because they allow a lot of stuff that you wouldn't allow
I
in
mean,
other
there
sports.
are
So
literally
again,
rules for war, Remy. Like the Geneva
of course,
Conventions, right?
yeah,
Like we have
yes,
rules for
exactly.
actually killing people and how that should
Mm,
be practiced. Like so.
yeah.
Yeah, there. I definitely agree that there should be rules. Like there, but it's so hard sometimes to define those rules.
Mm.
Is it okay? Is it okay to taunt? Is it okay to, we were talking about this before. The guy who got caught in a wobble in Smash Melee, and the guy sitting next to him who was caught in the wobble for ice climbers. By the way, if anyone doesn't know what this is, it's a combo that the ice climbers can do in Melee where your opponent can't out. It's an infinite combo.
So it's infinite combo, right?
And this
Okay.
guy got caught in the ice climbers wobble, and it was in a real life tournament, and he just looked at the guy and just started screaming in his face to like try and get him to
Right.
drop the combo. And I'm all for taunting. I love taunting. I love teabagging. I think that's unacceptable because
Yeah.
that's crossing a line in my opinion. Like let him do his combo. You got caught in it. Like
This is definitely part of the things. And then you've got like, well, what if he'd like waved his face or
I
like,
think that's
you know,
unacceptable as well. Yeah.
yeah, or nudging like this. Going back to the old arcade days, I played in a lot of stand-up cabinets, like side by side, and there was always a thing with like playing like if you played like a really big dude, and he'd be like elbowing you, like nudging you as like you'd be doing a combo or something, and this was just like this is just not fun, and I'd be just like I would walk away, I'm not
I
playing
was
this
about to
guy
say
because
yeah.
he's a
Just
jerk.
walk away. Yeah. Be like
Like
hey like
even though you just paid money, but it'd be just like, well, like whatever,
yeah.
hopefully, and but this sort of thing. So yeah, there are just definitely rules. I think like the fighting game scene in particular, like has been a bit too lax historically. Like we love to get hype and all this shouting and things like this, but yeah, if you want to make this more welcoming to like a more diverse audience and things like that, I do think that you need to calm down a little bit on some of these things, like some of the kind of pre-match and post-match like screaming and pop-offs and things like that. Some of that's great, and like most of it's absolutely fine, but there is stuff that's really close to the line. I mean, in that circumstance, like the screaming thing, that sounds like awful. There was a hilarious example of that actually, which is the fun way of doing that was at Eva a couple of years ago. I think it was like a side tournament for a game called Fist of the North Star, which has got masses and masses of infinite combos. It's kind of renowned for it. It's a ridiculous game. Don't play it unless you love Fist of the North Star, in which case do. But like, if you love infinite combos, get on it. But like, it's literally just combos, nothing else. But this guy, again, it was a very similar situation, and these combos go on for minutes. And this guy basically he got out his wallet and started like trying to bribe his opponent to like
To stop
you
the
know
combo.
have and he like yeah, so he put like $1 and then like $5, and he was like trying to say like, come on, if you drop the combo, I'll give you a
See, that's
dollar to
funny.
like
That's
drop the
pretty good.
combo.
Yeah.
It was absolutely hilarious, and the guy just went, no, I want to win, and carried on doing his combo. But that was so funny. Like I was like that. I
Yeah.
couldn't argue with that one. But yeah,
I
but
mean,
there's been
just to give an example of myself, or some things that I think would be unacceptable in some areas, but acceptable in other areas, depending on the context. Is I mean, I've played Smash Brothers. I play a lot of Smash with my friends, like when I'm out at conventions and stuff, because everyone knows Smash, right? So like we'll be playing, and like these are people that I know very well, right? So very good friends that I've known for years, that we understand each other, right? And we'll be playing Smash, and like they start like beating me or something, and I don't do this often, but sometimes just for fun, I'll look over and I'll just like put my hand all over their controller to like mess them up, and we
yeah,
get each
doing
other,
things
right?
with your friends.
And we get each other, but like in a real tournament, obviously, don't do that. And don't do that to random people, right? But, in the right context, I think most things are acceptable. It's just, it depends
Mm,
on the context, right? It depends, like, for example, my friend doesn't care that I did that because it was a casual game and we're just having fun. And I don't do it like
yeah.
all the time, right? Like, I do that, like, I think I've done that maybe twice, like, ever. And it was because like they did something to me first, like they would like nudge me or something, and then I'm just like, screw you, like, and it was just this funny moment. And everyone had a good laugh and no one got mad at each other, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But obviously, if you do that,
But
like
if
a
you'd been in a
sub,
tournament match that had been for money or something, and you'd done
that's
it, you'd have been like, well,
unacceptable. Unacceptable.
absolutely unacceptable. Yeah, so there's different circumstances. Again, I've done actually. Thinking about it, I've done teabagging with friends on Street Fighter Five as well.
Remy,
Like,
oh
is it
man,
someone?
unacceptable, Remy.
But someone I played like hundreds of matches against and things like that in a row, and we just like start doing it. And actually, it's often because I've seen someone do it on a tournament, and I'm like, oh, that'd just be funny to do it because he's like, he's often I get like he's just shocked. He was like, can't believe you just did that. It's totally unlike you, and it's like, but that's it's like someone that doesn't swear very often, and then they use a swear word as a
It's
it
like
becomes
what?
very effective.
Yeah,
It becomes a very effective thing if you don't use it all the time.
that's true.
So I mean that's actually maybe with Knuckle Do because they did point out like if he carried on doing this to everybody, then it would lose any effect. Right,
That's
because
true,
everyone just
man.
go, well, it's just Knuckle Do. He's obviously gonna taunt me and teabag me and all this stuff. Well, whatever.
Well, I
Like
think
that's
that's
just what
why
he.
like a lot of people just started doing it with him. Like they'd see him teabagging and they would start doing it too,
Yeah,
and they just like looked at each other, and just smiled and laughed. Um,
yeah,
that's how I see it because like with my friends, I teabag with my friends a lot, and they do it to me too, and we just have a good time. I will say though, I definitely think this goes for anything with taunting is that you know even if you do it, and even if you're with people that you know who do it with you and stuff, there are points and times when you probably should. Like say someone's having like a bad day, you know.
yeah. If
Um,
you know they're angry
yeah,
for
if you
some
know,
other reason,
yeah,
yeah,
like, and I've actually like messed up on this myself, where like I would be playing with a friend who am significantly better with, and like he knows I do this kind of stuff, and like we joke about it, but there have been times where I didn't recognize that he was having kind of a bad day, and I started doing that, and it really got to him, because he like I could tell in his voice. We were playing online, but I could like tell in his voice he was like not having fun because I was beating him still and I kept doing it. And like afterwards, I had to think about it. I was like, man, I shouldn't have been taunting at that point because even though usually it was okay, he wasn't having a good day, and like that was making him feel worse about the losses. When like usually it
right,
would make him feel better because he would have fun with it, but because he was having a
yeah,
bad day, he was feeling worse about it. So I think it's very important to just I think comedians say this, like, know your audience, I guess. Like, know who you're playing.
yeah,
Like
yeah. That's a
understand what
good
you're
way
doing. I
of putting
mean,
it.
it's just like, have basic human decency, right? Like be a good person, right? Like, yeah, it's okay to have fun, but like know who you're doing it to. Make sure, like, I think in Core Gaming, I think they said something along the lines of, I think it might have been a quote from somewhere else. I don't remember, but I heard it in the video where it said, don't like only taunt those that are like above you or like on the same skill. Like don't taunt people
Right.
below you, and obviously unless like it's the right context, right? Like a friend or something. But like you
Hmm.
shouldn't be like if you're in a tournament, like say Knuckle is playing in a tournament like and his first match is like a new player.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't taunt that person.
No one.
And I
Yeah.
don't think he would. I don't think Knuckle
No.
would do that because there's this thing where if you're taunting people that are on the same skill level as you, it's sort of like almost like a camaraderie thing. I would think it's just like, hey, like I'm on the same skill level with you, like deal with it, right? But like if you're against someone lower than you, like really lower than you, and like you're not friends and it's just random people, maybe you shouldn't taunt. But then
Mm.
again, in online gaming, when you like in a non or in real life perspective, it does happen
Yeah.
where you'll beat people that are obviously lower than you and you still taunt them, and that's almost like more acceptable, I think. Even if you
Mm.
shouldn't do it, like I'm just saying acceptable in like the grand scheme. Like most people would be okay with that, or at least
Right.
would just consider it normal, even though it might not be. Right?
It still might show you're a bit of a jerk at
Yeah.
times. I don't know.
No, I think it does.
I think
But I think that's the
that's a
point,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Taunting definitely can show you as a jerk, right?
Yeah. But like you say, it depends on how and when you do it. Again, that's a example. I don't know. Like, did Knuckle do taunt like all his opponents all the way up to the top finals and things? I'm like, probably not. And if he did, it would have lost it. You'd think, well, that's a bit of an idiot thing to do.
Like why would
But
you taunt
yeah,
like an
and
amateur, right?
kind of, yeah. Like that would be far less impressive. And also, it was like the fact he did it in high stakes situations that made it so entertaining as well, because he was often doing something either executionally more difficult to do or risking like messing things up for himself. He obviously decided that it was worth the risk because he thought it would affect his opponents badly and they'd play worse, and sometimes they did. So, it sometimes worked out for him. Sometimes it didn't. Like sometimes he'd drop a combo and then he'd like give the opponent another chance to win. And so it's like, well, but he was obviously part, and also for the entertainment thing with esports and the whole like becoming a personality. I think like it got his name known. So I think in terms of a publicity thing for him, like it generally worked out. But if he'd been doing it to like new players early in an event, then probably would have backfired, and people have been like, okay, this guy's a jerk. We don't want to,
Yeah,
support him. So,
if he's teabagging someone that's on the same skill level, that's what I was saying. Most
mm,
people are like, okay, like they might disagree with it, but in general, they're like, that's like acceptable. Like you should be allowed to do that. But if they saw Knuckle do teabagging like a really low player who's like new to the game, it'd be like, okay, Knuckle do, come on, like really, Now
well,
here's a
that's why that sorry, back to the refereeing of it. If you did try and put a rule in, that's where it would become even more difficult actually, because of the because a lot of the fighting game players do know each other. Like the high level guys, they play each other. Like there's so many tournaments these
yeah.
days in fighting games. Like they're playing each other every couple of weeks and things like that, traveling around the world. And some of them like hang out together. They go for
This
food.
happens in every esports. The top
Yeah,
players play
always,
each other.
but I'm sure. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, well, there's a camaraderie there now. Like, would it be the onus on someone to maybe complain about it? Like, if you could do it that way and say, well, is it down? So how would you like, well, if the other person was offended by something, that then you could bring it up. And that again,
Well, there's also
eventually
the
these things will work
intent, right?
themselves
There's
out.
always the intent. I think intent's very important because like you do it to someone and they like get really frustrated at it and bring it up, but the person wasn't trying
Mm,
to do that; they were just doing it for fun. Like I personally think that all taunting within the game itself should be allowed. Like
yeah.
mechanics in the game, so like crouching or teabagging or taunt buttons or I think all of that should be always allowed. I don't think there should be like an outside rule that says you cannot do that. Um,
Hmm.
Now you could potentially have a system that doesn't have any of that, and I wanted to bring that up. Let's talk about Fantasy Strike. I think is a great example of this. Fantasy Strike can't really taunt people, right? There's not really a good way of doing it because I mean, like I've seen some people they'll like go back and
That's
forth
bad.
really fast, right? But like even that's not really the same. Like you cannot. There's no crouching in Fantasy Strike, so you can't teabag. After you beat someone, the game immediately stops, so you can't move anymore. What do you think of that? Do you
Hmm.
think this is a good thing, a bad thing, or it doesn't matter either way?
So, okay, loads of things to unpack here. One of the things is, I would argue you have got a taunt in Fantasy Strike, which is actually the whiffing a grab. Like,
Okay.
I think that's the most effective one if you really want to try your best to play a taunt type situation is deliberately whiff grab. But there's a few situations again that would come back to thing where sometimes you actually can do that with a good purpose. So I know Rook, for example, like
Yeah.
there's you get certain knockdowns and actually a double grab whip will perfectly time your next meaty. So there's like you could be using it for like actual valid reasons to attempt to help do like timing of sequences. Um,
Or even to mix your
maybe
opponent
even
up, right?
between or to like manually make sure you delay something. So if you know, okay, I'm just throwing fireballs without thinking, and I want to force myself to delay my next fireball, you might actually make yourself grab in the middle, and someone go, oh, they're taunting me. It's like, no, I was just trying to delay my next fireball. Like, so there's a reason. But I think you've got that. You have got the wiggling back and forth thing, but again, that's really hard to tell like what someone's doing, especially as like that can be a useful thing, like trying to move in and out of range in footsie
It's very
situations.
important, actually.
Um,
Very good.
some characters the warp speed is so fast that like that's like insane a thing to do, and it actually messes up if you have got a really laggy match. Certain characters can really like screw with the lag with that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's just something about netcode, isn't it? But yeah, not of that. So, but I think so. There's a thing I was going to talk about earlier about cultural issues. There have been, and you said about the way the game pauses like on the KO and you can't do any actions. I know you said you would be nice to be able to continue your combo maybe, or like do these
I
things.
wish I had like 3 seconds to do anything I wanted. Like I
See
wish it
the
gave me a button like after that to teabag. I wish I could press taunt buttons. I wish I could do anything I wanted. I love
so
taunting
you'd
and
be able to
oh
waste your C for me, sir?
yes, I would I okay, Fantasy Strike. David Serlin. I want an ability. So after I beat someone in a round, give me 3 to 4 seconds where I can press a button to waste my super meter to taunt people. because I will do that. If that is what I have to do to
If that's
taunt
what it
someone, I will
takes,
do
that
it.
will be
Yeah.
the only thing you can do to taunt. I think you can do it if you want to use this. So, but well, so there has been games, right? This comes down to cultural things. There have been games where this was a thing that could happen. I think one of the early builds of Street Fighter 4 even had it, and then they took it out. And also I'd say traditionally, like most fighting games were made in Japan, and taunting in general over there is really like not accepted and very frowned upon. Um, and this comes into these cultural situations and the intent and how people are going to take something. So I joked to you before we started the podcast about Americans being all about the whole like trash talking but it is a
No,
typical part of
no,
like American
it is an
competitive
American
culture.
thing, I think. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm an American and you're British, and we were talking about earlier, and
Hmm.
I could see your face. You were a little surprised when I was talking about how like rude I get sometimes with my friends and stuff, and like we're just joking around. But to you, I think, and to other maybe Europeans or Asians, like they might be like, "Oh my god, like what do you say?" You know? It's like, "Oh, I'm just talking about
Yeah.
obscenities, normal American things, right?"
But
um, yeah, but like America's
you get
definitely
you get
much more vulgar. I think Americans generally are more accepting of the vulgar. More like, okay, this is just normal, right? Like this is just gaming culture. This is just
mm,
how people talk. I'm not saying that people should talk that way. Let me clarify this because I don't think people should necessarily. I do think though in certain contexts, like with my friends, right? Like, but like if I'm being rude to someone in real life, yeah, that's not okay. That's wrong, right? I think we both agree with that.
yeah. I mean, there's the other that I get. Sorry, just to quickly get say that's the other thing with like rules in a tournament, for example, like and hate speech and things like that, and vulgar language, and maybe that would be okay if you're in a room with your friends, of course, like whatever you're accepting of this. But if you said certain things in a public venue at a tournament, you'd expect to get in trouble for them. And again, these are the soft rules that every tournament event has, whether they're written down or not. Like, um, so yes, that's an aspect of the different culture as well in different environments. But
I
yeah, like for example, like people like I know people like Knuckle do, like he wouldn't perhaps taunt against a Japanese player, but he'd do it to another American player, things like that. That's it's quite interesting that people because he knew it would get taken very badly. And again, I think so. It comes back to your thing about the mechanics within a game. So if you look at most Street Fighter games, even when they've had it, they've removed it. Like that kind of thing you're talking about, where there was in some of the X-Men series games, you could like press a button and then like your character would freeze, but you could press a button and continue to do moves on your opponent. But actually, what you often I would tend to do is like jump away from them and try and pause my character in a particularly cool pose as the KO like finally locked in. Like it was already happened, but you'd get like a pause screen and you'd try and get the win screen on a cool pose as opposed to like using it to just do extend your combo for no reason because they're already knocked out. Um, they've generally took it out, and I think it's like generally was seen as like a bit rude in Japan to do that kind of thing, perhaps.
It's a cultural thing,
Um,
right?
but the American example, the most extreme version of this would be Mortal Kombat,
Mm.
where not only do you get a few seconds to do whatever you want to your opponent's like
You literally
stun,
like gut them
you can do them.
basically,
You
yeah.
can do the yeah,
Like
you can do the
fatalities, yeah.
fatalities and the babalities and the various like other things they added. Like, and
That's why I
those are
love
all
Mortal
essential.
Kombat. Great.
So you've got options here. Like, interestingly, as much as like some fighting games have been perhaps too similar and like not have enough variety and different styles of mechanics, like this is something you have got different options. So if you really want to go to the extremes, that kind of thing, there are games that cater to it. And I don't think every fighting game needs to cater to that. And I don't necessarily think. I certainly, certainly don't think Van Strike. If it did add something, if it added an actual taunt button, that was a character specific taunt, and it could be like some very characterful stuff, and maybe some of them could have actual in-game effects. So majority characters it maybe wouldn't be useful, but you could maybe have one character like for example where you said Q in Street Fighter 3, where you have one or two characters where a taunt would actually be a function that they would sometimes want to use. But part of the design of Fantasy Strike, of course, is to be very accessible and have a smallest amount of buttons possible. and partly because of the Nintendo Switch, they wanted to keep it like playable on a single Joy-Con when split from a Switch main
You could
docked
you could add a
console.
taunt for
So
like clicking the button, right? Like clicking the click. That could be the taunt.
the down click on the stick, maybe, but then
Or
you might
like
accidentally.
double clicking a button. I mean, yeah, you might accidentally mess it up, but I mean, I think that's almost kind of a point as well. It's just like if you don't do your taunt right, you get punished.
I think it's in Fantasy Strike case in particular, due to its like very deliberately trying to be minimalist design on that kind of thing. Like everything that's been added to that game, a lot of people go, "Oh, why did they remove crouch blocking, for example?" It's like no, they started from an even simpler game and gradually added more mechanics until it became like a satisfying game to play and had enough depth. They didn't ever take anything out. Like barring patches where they're like nerfing things and things like that.
You
But
know what
like
I
in
think,
terms of
Remy?
gen, hmm?
You know what I think? I think that I
You
don't
want
think.
taunting?
Yes. No, I don't think that they took crouching out. They took teabagging out. They took they.
That was the whole reason
That was
why.
the only reason
Oh,
why. No.
the whole reason why you can't crouch in Fantasy Strike is purely to
Purely so
make
you can't
sure
taunt people.
you can't teabag anyone. They designed it just before you'd even got the game. We were talking about that. We were talking about like Pirate King, the scourge of Overwatch.
Yeah, the scourge of Overwatch, absolutely. Man, no, I've had examples where I would kill someone and then I would teabag them, and then one of their teammates would then kill me as I'm doing that, right? Because I'm not paying attention. And then the person
Right,
who I
right.
killed and teabagged would type in chat and say like F you like you like karma. And then I like type law and I'm just like, dude.
Yeah,
And like to me
it's
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 funny because
different.
I'm like I think it's funny because to me in an online game I'm thinking like you're taking but like we've been talking about previously, like again, different people are gonna take things differently, and I've even had examples where I get teabagged and I'm just like, screw you, like why are you doing that? Like
You
you
get
think you're
angry
better
about
than
it.
me? You think you're better than me? Um, yeah, it's a lot of cultural things like we talked about with Japan and America. It's a lot of individual views on this as well, and
Mm,
yeah, I will say though, I back to the fantasy strike thing and just like taunting and I don't think taunting and teabagging is needed in a game. Like I don't think it has to be in a game. Like I don't think fantasy strike needs. However, I do think that having at least some form of taunting in the game itself, and the reason I think it's a good thing is because I think part of a competitive game is the psychological aspect. And I think
mhm.
that being a very strong competitive player is having a very strong mental. And if you are a player that can get into people's heads and sort of break that concentration within the game itself, I think that's a very important. I think it adds to the level. Like I think a lot of people reference Daigo. He doesn't get to he just is so calm and he's such a good player because of it, right? But then you also have players that do sometimes get heated and they also play better when they get heated, right? Like I
Mhm.
remember there's this video, I don't remember, you could probably find it on YouTube up, where this guy, I think he was playing Daigo, and he got on stage, and he drank like a whole Red Bull, and then he like pulled off his shirt and just like beat Daigo. And it was just this like epic moment of just like him getting so focused and just so like into it, right?
Mhm.
This also maybe goes into the drug usage uh podcast in the future, perhaps, with like
We'll talk
caffeine and
about that.
Adderall and all that. But I won't get into that right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing. It's an individual thing. It's just there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But I think we can both agree that there is a line, and we shouldn't be like verbally abusing people, and we shouldn't be physically abusing, and we also shouldn't
Mhm.
be physically messing up their gameplay, like for example putting the hands in front of the face or touching their controllers or anything like that. I think we can both agree that those kinds of things are
Yeah.
unacceptable, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, I was going to go back to this comes back to a really old story of mine. You probably know Lynn's book, Playing to Win.
Yes.
Yeah. So, in the very early days of in the early 90s. There was old Usenet news groups, and there was a group called alt.games.sf2, which was like it was for Street Fighter 2, but because it was like one of the main fighting game chat places, like kind of all people from all kind of games often posted in there about fighting games. It's one of the first times I got online, and I was talking in a thread, and Serlin was one of the people posting in that thread, and this is actually how I first heard about him. Like before he'd even published the book, I believe. I'm sure I'll find out if I'm wrong about that, but I think it was long before he'd even. I think he'd written like parts of the book, and he was like kind of deciding it. And we actually got into a debate about this, and I was sort of saying, well, no, playing to win's not cool because this exactly what you're talking about. One of the things you'd see in arcades, like the whole bashing the thing, like nudging the opponent. Like one of the interesting things is when they added taunts to some of these fighting games was around that time. And the way you did taunt in the arcade was you press the like player one, player two button, right? And they were usually out off the top of the cabinet. They were like down at the bottom. Um, so what people were doing, again, this is another jerk move people do in the arcade, is they'd like reach down and press their opponent's taunt button
Oh,
because you could like reach over, do
yeah,
it,
that's
just like you
yeah,
could reach over and
that's
press the button.
unacceptable, right? That's not really taunting. That's just
No, they were
yeah,
just cheating
yeah,
basically
exactly, yeah.
and but then they jump at them and get a combo. Opponent locked in taunt animation. And so yeah, this is some of the like, and it's like again, Japan didn't think about this perhaps because they have the back-to-back cabinets, right? So you can't
Mm.
possibly get up, walk around, and press it. But
Well,
when you're on the side
you
of
could do not doubt
the
human
cabinet,
ingenuity. I
you won't be able to get back to your seated time now. Seriously,
no,
they were a long way. If you played in a Japanese
I'm
arcade, you'll know what I'm
imagining
talking
someone
about.
though like with a like with some like really long like thing on their arm and just reaching around.
You could have a signal. You could send up like a little flag to like your friend who's the other
Yeah,
side, and like you
exactly. Yeah,
wave it, and
teamwork.
like their friend would move in and teamwork. Yeah, like, but but basically,
This is
yeah.
okay,
So
right?
but
He's on my team. We're both on Team Liquid or like
it's all part of the team plan,
we're both on
right? But
Cloud 9. It's okay. It's a team
so
tournament.
I remembered this. This like really stuck in my memory. So the very first time I heard about Serlin's book and things, I thought, oh, I don't agree with this guy. He's gonna, I thought his argument was that kind of thing. Was like, anything it takes to win, kind of was the attitude. But that wasn't Serlin at all. That was other jerks on this thread trying to like tear his argument apart, as it were. But obviously, the arguments there's not anything what he's talking about if you read his book, and you can read it all online as well. And it's a fascinating book about the mindset of competition. And again, obviously, it goes into sportsmanship and things like this. And I'm sure he'd see it similarly to the way we do, which is the fact that yeah, the in-game like teabagging, whatever motions you are doing in the game, and pressing you're actually using your taunt as a taunt, whatever you wanted to do within the game mechanics, like Serlin would be absolutely fine with that. But like as soon as you get to like outside of the game stuff, then that's cheating, and there are rules against this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's
And
giving you
any
basically
tournament, yeah, any tournament that's worth attending will stop these kind of things. But yeah, it's a really like the problem in some ways with the fighting game scene is that like a lot of things that perhaps shouldn't be acceptable have been pretty acceptable for some time, like the whole shouting at
yeah, that should be
your
absolutely unacceptable.
opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really grey area. And then you get the whole thing about like the crowd like making lots of noise, and then are they just doing it because they're getting excited about the match, or are they doing it on purpose try and put off one of the players, especially if say a lot of the people are supporting one of the players, or just the environment. I don't know if you've seen how like real life fighting game events get, but they're pretty basic. Like they're not like some other esports. Obviously they are when you get to
Like
the top
Evo
level in
and
the
stuff,
finals and
yeah.
things like that, and Evo and Capcom Cup, which is coming like in December. So
But most
gosh,
are
that
more
hardly.
like almost like local game shops, you
But
know?
the early rounds, even of some of the biggest events like Evo, you'll essentially be like a desk and like a few chairs and a bunch of people sat around those chairs, and there's a big crowd just like stood up
This is
milling
how a lot
around.
of
Some people
tournaments
might be
are, though.
watching it.
Like even like card game
Yeah,
tournaments. Like
exactly.
if you go to
It's
the Pro
pretty.
Tour for Magic the Gathering, I'm
Yeah.
obviously it's called the Mythic Championship. It's different now, but originally, you go to the Pro Tour and it's the Pro Tour. You had to get there by playing very well or winning a Grand Prix or top 8ing a Grand Prix. But
Mm.
when you get there for the first time, literally just playing a normal table. because there's so
Yeah.
many people there, like 200, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of players, and then you only get that really like iconic stuff at the very end when you're in the finals.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the same. So yeah, but there's been a lot of issues where this is like, so the kind of the crowd's getting into it, and then the general thing of like having lots of people cheering for one player, or like the audience being huge around one game, but not someone else gets to play in like peace and quiet because they're not as known or whatever. It's a grey area, and again, most of this stuff is fine, but you do see things that perhaps cross the line. And there's a very recent example. And again, this came down to the cultural differences as well. So Puerto Rico, they've obviously had some like strong players come up recently, and they're seen. Sorry, I'm thinking. I'm not. I'm thinking. Sorry, Dominican Republic, not Puerto Rico. Getting confused. Puerto Rico's PR Balrog, who's like a really cool guy, and I've like played against him and met him and stuff. But anyway, Dominican Republic guys, they were like they've had the guy who won Capcom Cup a few years ago, and his name escapes me right now. Apologies for that. But yeah, and then his teammate Kaba was known for like screaming and shouting and getting really hype. Um, and there was a situation where they had one of these players from Dominican Republic against one of the top Japanese players, and all the kind of Dominican Republic crowd, like the fans, were all like screaming and ranting and things, and actually clearly doing it as a psychological thing, because they weren't just doing it consistently throughout the match. They'd do it, say, like that example of when one player's in the middle of a combo, they'd start screaming, like trying to direct the noise at them, and things like that. And again, I think the Japanese player complained, and it became like a new rule, and it was a big topic of discussion of like, well, should we allow the crowd to get hype? And people want that. People are like, yeah, but this is really cool, and like they love the passion, but it's like the cultural differences. Like you wouldn't get that from Japanese
Yeah,
players or teams.
I think for myself personally, I think we talked a little bit about the podcast, but I'm I'm more okay with the crowd basically doing whatever they want, in terms of like cheering and things like that. I think it's okay. Even like let's say the crowd is entirely in favor of one player, right? And they are screaming and shouting against that one player or for the other player. There's no support for one of the players, right? I think that's okay. Like I don't think that's a bad thing
Can't
because like
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can't prevent that.
because yeah, exactly, like there's no way of really stopping that, right, unless it's like an individual person doing it. Do I think that the crowd should be doing things to try and mess up someone's combo? No, I don't think they should be doing that. Should they be allowed to? Well, there's not really a way to stop them, right? Like, so yes, like
Well,
they
what?
should be able to do that if they want to, but they shouldn't, if that makes sense. Like, you shouldn't do that, but yes, they could do that, but like I think that also adds another thing to it, because like imagine, maybe this is just me being trying to put an optimistic, but say you're the player that's being targeted by the crowd, right? And like everyone hates you, and then you win. It's sort of like a big middle finger to the crowd, like, oh, you thought that you could stop me, and like no. But yeah, the reason I think I'm more okay with the crowds doing these things, even if I disagree with specific aspects, is because there's not really a way to stop it unless you just ask everyone in the crowd to leave, you know.
What they're starting to do though, so there has been some rules, and again, you get into what sports done, and usually you've got a segregation of the match itself, like the on-field things, and there's a lot of these are like field sports, and then you've got like there's rules about how you can build your stadiums, things like that, how close the crowd can be, like, and then there's the crowd interact, like it's banned, so like, um, I mean, you even got in physical things, like saying that there's a situation with the Smash crowd, someone in the crowd throwing crabs onto the into the playing area. But and again,
Hey,
you've had
that's
this in real
wrong. Yeah,
sports.
that's.
You've had the crowd like throwing snowballs or projectiles into the field,
I don't think that
and
should
that
be.
actually
Yeah,
of
that's not acceptable.
course it's not acceptable. Like the referee will stop the match, and I think the team he's I don't think it's ever happened, but I believe there are rules in place for this, and in sports you've generally got a stadium that's like one of the teams' fans rather than a neutral venue, like you would typically see in esports. There's not really like the level of fans at this point where you've got a venue that's supporting like, but you might have it in countries, so I don't know. But yeah, but in these situations, like I think it's the home team. Like if their crowd doesn't like stop disrupting the match, then they'll forfeit the game.
Oh,
Um, so they'll lose essentially if they can't stop.
couldn't
So
there
it's
couldn't
on
there
them
be
to
like
sort of
issues with
control their
that
own
though?
crowd, as it would be.
There'd be issues with
I
that
don't think it's.
where like the enemy team's fans go into the home team's spot and then disrupt the game and then win.
I mean, I guess this is why you have referees, though.
Yeah.
They have to rule on these situations as and when they occurred. It's never got to that extent because again, as long as people kind of know this is what's going to happen, um, then like even the on mass like crowd mentality is gonna so people are gonna be like, hang on, you next to me, stop doing that. You're gonna cost our team like the match.
Yeah,
So it's
I
like,
think it's sort of like the mob mentality, right? Like, I think
mm,
that we definitely have to be careful, but I think in general, most things should be allowed. Like, as long as they're just saying things. Yeah, the moment if they're throwing things or things like that, that shouldn't be allowed. But if that's the case, generally it's like
yeah,
specific people who are doing that, and you can just kick those people out, right? It's generally not like everyone
yeah.
doing it. Um,
So what? But sorry.
I was just gonna give an example, like for let's look at like music concerts, right, or like that where the person's singing or something, and then the crowd just starts really getting mad at like the person for either what they're singing or what they're specifically saying. Maybe they're talking about politics or something like that, and the crowd gets really mad, and they start like sometimes throwing insults or sometimes just yelling at the person, right? And it's like, should that be allowed? Personally, I think yeah. I mean, that's the crowd. Like you're a performer, you're a performer, or you're an athlete, or you're whatever, and like yeah, you're gonna have haters if you say things, and I think that's okay. Like it's okay for the crowd to do things that where they like for example Kanye West. It was at a music award or something, and he was only supposed to have like a few minutes or something or 10 minutes or something like that on stage, and he like stood on stage for like 30 minutes and just like was talking about. I think he was talking about like politics or Trump or something like that, and like I'm not want to turn this into politics or anything,
Mm.
but like the people in the crowd weren't necessarily mad that he was talking about politics. They were mad that he like it was a music award thing and he was talking about politics and also the fact that he stood there and took up like 30 minutes to an hour, you know, they were like calling him out. I'm like, yeah, he should be called out for that, you know. I was surprised that like the staff didn't like pull him off stage, you know.
Well, that's down to the individual events. It's the similar thing though. It's down to that event, and so like again, there's a lot of hidden like unwritten rules. There's a lot of written rules, and there's a lot of unwritten rules. Will get people into trouble in these situations, and that's how it's always going to be, and it's got to be. The like the space. So the thing I think what they actually have got some rules in now at certain Capcom events or whatever they has to be a certain amount of space from the stage, so the players can't be like, yeah, you can scream and shout, but you've got to do it from a certain amount of space back. And at any stage, if like the tournament organizer or the whoever's like refereeing that match or whatever can like ask the crowd to move back or whatever. And they've even had issues with like coaching and people coming on and then like people jumping on the stages. They've got usually like they're not allowed to jump, you know. There's a lot of and I think those things again, that's because you've got like it's it's almost this halfway state between being a professional sport, but then also not, which is also what's beautiful about it at times. But you do get these clashes of expectation.
Yeah,
Like I'm like, well, I'm surely I can run on the stage and like shout for my friend and like give him a hug or whatever. But it's like, well, no, because you wouldn't get that in a professional sport. You wouldn't be expected to be able to jump into the boxing ring like just because it was your friend boxing. Like it didn't. It doesn't matter. Like you're
yeah,
an audience.
yeah.
You're either in the event or you're not, right?
Yeah, I'm a
So
little like it's so weird though because like you said it's like in between professional and not, right? Because the first Smash tournament I ever went to, actually the only one I've been to, but like the first one I ever like participated in was very local. It was like a local game shop, and when I was playing, my friends were around me, and when they were playing, I was around them, and like they did cool things. Like after like each match thing, I'd like pat them on the back and be like, "Hey man, you got this, keep going, right?" Or would say something like that. Obviously, I was very silent. Like during the actual matches when I was watching, didn't say anything because I felt like that was respectful to the other player. You know, don't like I wasn't giving them tips. I wasn't saying anything because I was like, this is respectful. I should not distract this person by saying, right? But like in between and like after the match, I would I would give him a hug or pat him on the back or say like you did a good job and all that, you know. But then again,
mhm.
I also think that when you get to the tournaments that have like stages or like live cams or like recording. I definitely think that there should be, no people on stage, none of that, because I think that's more of a professional thing. I think there's like this, there's the professional side, and there's more of the amateurish side, and I think there's different. Or you could have both. You could have them both have the same rules. I mean, in terms of jumping on stage or talking to your, you know.
Yeah, interesting. I've had like an instant of like someone actually not even part of the match like nudge me during a tournament match, and that was like that really frustrated the heck out of me, as you can imagine.
Oh, they do it like on
Um,
purpose to like mess you up.
no, no, no. It's just again a small venue without enough space, and someone's trying to move past, and I'm like trying to play a tournament match, and they've actually jogged me while I'm playing, and I lost that match, and it really threw me off
I was
because I kind of looked around like what's happening, like oh, you know. But then I've also had the crowd support, and like very vocal, not quite, maybe not quite to the level of public players, but I've had like some very very rowdy friends
Yeah,
in the
no,
venue
yeah,
supporting me,
yeah. I've actually
and
had. I was running a Smash tournament at a convention, and I actually almost had to ask this guy to like, because like I feel bad saying that, but like because I was running the event, and it was the final match, right? And there actually was a bit of prize there on the line, like get like an Inuyasha DVD or something, and second place it was like a it
right,
was a
right.
free thing, and I got it from the, so I wasn't gonna complain, right? Um, but yeah, so they were playing their final match, and like we got like a big crowd. There was like 10 or 15 people, and we were all surrounded and huddled around this one, right, for Smash, and they were playing, and generally speaking, everyone was pretty quiet and pretty respectful, right? They were chatting a bit and saying like, oh, that, but it was pretty chill, right? But there was this one guy who was friends with one of the players, who was match. Like every time something happened, just like erupt in just like loud, obnoxious things, and just sit like screaming and like all these things, and like talking to his other friends, like, "Hey man!" like raising his voice, and I'm thinking like, dude, like I get that you're excited. I didn't say this to him because I didn't feel like it was as bad as it could have been, but I was about to, because it was like, I'm like, dude, you're distracting not only your friend probably, but definitely this other guy who's trying to win as well. Like you're like, because I could tell it was distracting. It looked like it was kind of distracting the other player, because like
Hmm.
he it looked like he wasn't playing properly whenever this guy was talking. I was like, man, you gotta like if that ever happens again, I'll probably ask and be like, hey man, can you like just tone it down a bit? Like you don't have to, like, you can still cheer for your player, your friend, but like just tone it down a bit. Maybe try not to talk as much in the middle of the game. Um, and this was also because again, like it was a casual thing, so there were a lot of people around one
Right.
screen, and it was really close to each other, right? Like if it's further away, okay, that's fine, but like this was like
Hmm.
he was like basically like one seat away from this other player, right? And I'm just like, gotta write it down.
That's very similar to the situation actually that I was saying with the
Exactly.
with the Japanese player and the Dominican Republic guys. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, exactly though. But there's that line, and you as a TO in that situation, sort of thing, like you can ask, you can see when something's overstepping the line, and you're not. And so this is why you do have to have these rules, even though they're not written. Like at no point does it say that you cannot shout for your thing over a certain amount of
It's
decibels of volume at a certain
it's the
distance. Like,
yeah, it's crossing the line, right? Like there's this invisible line, and you
hmm,
have to be very careful to make sure that you're not taking away people's ability to be hype and ability to support, but you also have to be careful that they're not overstepping
yeah,
what's freedom. um
yeah,
I mean, this goes with anything, they're so like it's everywhere, right? There's always these lines and like that, and people are going to be very adamant about what they think the correct way to do things. And is there a correct way to do things in terms of like these kinds of rules, right? Probably not. Like, I don't think there's. I mean, I might think I'm right, you know, but am I? Is that the best way to do things? Maybe not. It all depends on the context, the situation, the culture, the person, right? I mean, it can be an individual too. Like, sometimes if the individual has been continuously doing bad things, they might get a more heavy penalty, because they've
Oh yeah,
done it in the
yeah,
past,
yeah.
right? So it's
Again, that's you can look at sports again. That's exactly the same thing that happens. Like you'll get a like the example I talked about earlier, like if you taunt or whatever, you might get a penalty, but if you keep doing it, you're going to get ejected from the game. Um, and then there's also like fines and things like that. The first fine you get for something won't be big, but like if you keep doing it, you'll get massive escalating fines and eventually get banned from the sport, like
yeah.
for perhaps a long time or forever. Like if you're someone that's continually behaving badly,
I mean, people
yeah,
in
like
the
you say,
Overwatch League have been kicked off of teams. The one I
yeah,
know of primarily is XQC got kicked off because he's a loudmouth and he was saying things without thinking, and like some people like called him out for being potentially like phobic and things like that, and he's not, like, he's really not like homophobic or anything. Like he's perfectly fine with everyone, right? But he like, and this wasn't even in the game, like this was on his stream where he was just saying things without thinking, and he was joking, right? He was joking about it. I didn't watch the videos, like he was just joking, and like it doesn't seem like he was really trying to be. But his team was like you can't do that, like we can't let you say those kinds of things because that reflects poorly on us.
right,
um
yeah, yeah. I do think it's exactly what you were saying though. The onus is going to be on these kind of things, and it has to be
I'm sorry, the
like
onus is going to be on
and
what?
the event organizer, so the tournament organizer or TO in terms of like that's up to them. So and obviously if Capcom or whatever, maybe there's other bodies that have some rules that they want to put in place. But you should know like what's acceptable at that environment at that venue. And if for example like you had the situation with one person in the crowd making a lot of noise, if someone had been upset about it, you could have stepped in and stopped them, and then it would be like, well, if you don't like calm down basically, or if you don't stop doing what you're doing that's disrupting the
I
players,
also think
like
it's
you're going to get kicked
yeah,
out of the audience.
I think
you,
it's
you get
important.
that in sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's important that as a player too, if you feel uncomfortable or if you think something is a little off, ask your TO about it. Be like, because I think one of the reasons I didn't actually tell the player to stop, or the not the player, the spectator just sort of stop, was because one, I didn't think it was as bad as it need, right? Like I thought it was almost there, but not
Wasn't
there.
on the line but
Yeah,
not
it
quite
was
there,
close,
yeah.
but not there yet, right? And also, the player didn't say anything, so that's another aspect for me personally. Like, I think that this is just my opinion. Like, I think that if you are a player and you are feeling uncomfortable, like, ask the TO. Be like, "Hey, TO, can you do something?" And the TO could say, "Yes, yes, you're right. Like, I
Yeah,
should do something," or they could say, "No, this is fine," right? And again, it's up to the TO. And um, but yeah, like if you feel uncomfortable, say something.
yeah,
Like the
I
only
do think that should be I think that should be more clear, like especially in fighting game things. I think there's such a kind of feeling that it's not acceptable to be upset about something. um it's always that should be quite clear. I think that's something that tournament organizers could improve at, is make it clear that like you can talk to a referee. I mean, you've got it in Magic, like it's very common.
Oh yeah, no,
Like
you do it all the
anything
time.
dodgy, call the judge. Like everyone knows that's acceptable, and you would never be like, "Oh, my opponent called the judge on me. What a jerk!" Like it's expected that that will happen, like a
I
number of times during the event, right?
Yeah, I played a
So
lot
I
of
wish that
Magic. Yeah.
there was a bit more of that kind of culture. That I mean, we probably will get to it as things become more professional and become bigger. But I do think that's a great way of doing it. Like it is the kind of, well, make a complaint, or like if you just want, okay, I want a referee here to watch this more closely. And this has been a big issue a lot. Unfortunately, this comes down to money as a lot of the time as well. And sort of organizers and bracket runners and things like basically being volunteers or not getting paid or not having any training. Like they don't necessarily know what's going on, and it's actually the players who are essentially running the tournament, and the other person's there just to like record the results. And yeah, there's all kinds of dodgy things have happened at like loads of events. I've experienced like loads of bad stuff. You can you can read the whole history. There's an esports tag on Agoners, and I've got loads of old reports
We'll
from
link it in the description.
events, tournaments where bad things have happened to me or to friends and things like that. But then there's this. I've had the sort of beneficial side that definitely helped me, which was like a friend making loads of noise for me, and like was it putting off my opponents? Like probably a bit, but we were in a really noisy bar environment, so it's kind of like, well, this guy isn't that, he's really loud, but I'm like, so's the music, so's the venue, like it was distracting for everyone the whole time in there. So it's kind of like, well, this is the environment we're in. So it didn't seem too unacceptable. I was finding it kind of funny, but kind of embarrassing. And I nearly kind of said, oh, could you calm down a bit? But then it was I was also finding it hilarious because he was sort of doing loads of memes and references and stuff. And it was people into fighting games would have probably got what he was doing. So it was kind of funny for them,
Oh,
hopefully,
I
as well.
see. I mean, like in Smash, like it happens a lot where like, be doing something with a character, and then like sometimes the crowd will like do something in real life that's like in reference to the character. Like for example, for myself, when if I'm ever playing King K. Rool, I was talking about it earlier in the podcast, like, and I kill someone, I'll not only use the belly flap in the game, I'll like look at my opponent, if it's a friend, right? Like if I'm playing with a friend, like, I'll look at my friend and just like belly slap myself, just like look at him in the face, like, oh, like, King K. Rool, it's hilarious. Like they love it, I love it, and then they'll beat me, and then I'm just like, like the
They do a
sad,
little slap,
yeah, a little slap,
sad slap.
Uh,
Never mind.
and sometimes they'll look at me after beating me, and they'll like do the slap on themselves, and I'm just like, hey, you can't do that. It's, um, I think that's probably banter, right? Like I think we didn't talk much about it,
Yeah,
but like that's another word,
no.
banter. That's more of like friendly stuff, though, right? Like banter is more sort of like friendly banter, like you don't really hear like the term bad banter, you hear friendly banter, right? Um, but yeah, I think we've been going for a
Yeah.
while here. We covered
We're about to wrap this up. There's one thing we didn't talk about was rage quitting, and like I don't know if you about that, or we can talk about a whole topic.
Yeah, I think we can maybe save that for another one because
Okay.
we've been running for a
There's a
while
lot
here.
of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, it's not really related to this. It's more to do with online things and things like that. But there are some.
There's
But
some
I mean,
examples
I
in
think.
tournaments with rage quitting. So
Mm,
I think rage quitting is definitely a good topic because, man, now I want to get into it, but I think we should end it for now.
we'll end it for now.
Yeah, this was a great conversation.
You
We
got any?
covered a lot.
Have you got any concluding thoughts on on? Has it changed your mind about anything to do with teabagging or taunting or anything like that?
I don't know if it necessarily entirely. I think I've sort of rethought some things. Not necessarily changed my mind entirely. I still love teabagging. I still love taunting, but I think I didn't think about all the connotations of individual like scenarios or things or things
Mm.
of that nature. So that it's definitely widened my view of the subject as I think any time you have a conversation with.
Yeah, no, same here. I've definitely thought more about some of the things that I've done in the past and what's been fun and what hasn't been fun for
Absolutely.
people. I think I gotta say, keep it classy is my my English response to a lot of this. This is
Keep it
given the
classy.
cultural thing. It's that's a line from Dudley from Street Fighter, by the way, because he's the English boxer.
Keep it
But
American
yeah,
is what I would say.
keep it
Keep it
American,
American.
keep it classy. Um,
I'm just like
yeah,
imagining
so
I'm imagining like a British guy with like a giant rocket launcher and like and like half American flag, half British flag. And then just like a word, keep it classy.
no, well, yeah. So, but I do think that's the thing for me personally. Like, yeah, I probably would never go too much down this road because I kind of enjoy the good natured spirit of competition around it too much that I would ever want to risk damaging that. I probably err on the side of caution. Whereas probably because of cultural reasons, you kind of err on the side of this that a certain amount of this is expected and fun.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, I'm definitely less caution. I'm more caution with people I don't know. But
I think that's a great way to be.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's something that you should just always do. Like if you don't know someone, be more cautious. Be more careful with how you say things or what you say because if you say something that could be taken in the way, you might say that with your friends and they might laugh about it because they understand you're not serious. But someone else might take that a little offensive. Even when you're not trying to be that way, right? I think it's very important to understand the context of the situation. Yeah, careful. Just just I'm just gonna say, just don't be an ass. Like, just like, can we just agree with that?
Yes.
Like, just don't be an ass.
We can agree with that. So we're gonna sign off with a taunt or your classic thumbs down there.
I'll give the I don't know. I would teabag, but I don't.
You would teabag the monitor.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Yeah. Thank
please
you.
not. Please no. Please no.
I'll do it off. I'll do it off the podcast. We'll.
Once the podcast ends, you can be sure that we will both teabag each other. There we go.
Oh, God.
Screwed.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. All right. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone who came out. Lots of good conversations here. Let us know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear what other people think of teabagging because lots of different views.
Controversial.
A lot of very controversial, but yeah. All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.